This news segment of the Suburban Radio Hour is brought to you by Click Air. Their team of certified technicians and electricians got you covered for all your heating and cooling needs. Click-air.ca, where comfort meets quality.
Good evening, Montreal. This is Beryl Wiseman, editor of the Suburban, with my great friends and colleagues, Anthony Godefort, features editor, Mark Lippeder, sports editor, Mike Cohen, with everything you need to know about entertainment and society news. And before we get started, let me just wish everybody out there, all the mothers out there, a very happy Mother's Day. Hope it was a very pleasant one for all of you. Things are never boring around town, and this week's issue and this week past is certainly no exception. We've got Mayor Alex Patashi, who's furious over his treatment and the treatment of all the demerged mayors at the Community Metropolitaine de Montréal, the CMM. We've got AGLO, we've got CMM. You got to keep all this straight. We'll have our Chelsea St. Pierre explain all this. Ensemble Montréal, the official opposition at City Hall, and a new business alliance are demanding that the Cavendish Link be built. Family of the woman found dead in the Lakeshore General emergency room, you may remember that story from last year, has now decided to sue the hospital and the CEOs for $1 million. The Ministère des Transports de Québec's parking expansion for the Ile-Étoile bridge chaos, people are saying it just won't work. And Ville Maria School in Westmount is not going anywhere. All that and many more stories in the paper. Pick it up. I want to, however, start off the show with a very special guest and a very special issue. This Tuesday is Israel Independence Day, 76th anniversary of the state, sister democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, and major rally happening at Place du Canada, as does every year at 11 o'clock in the morning. It's important for all of us, as we wrote in our editorial, and it's important for all of us because it's enough. It's enough. Yes, the pro-Hamas demonstrators, the pro-Palestinian demonstrators, call them what you will, have gone down in number. And yes, there are 200 very objectionable people sitting on McGill's campus. And frankly, McGill should sign the charge sheet so the police could do their job. You can't do it just on words. But we've gone through 6 months in this city, from the day after the October 7th slaughter, almost targeted, pre-organized, pre-packaged demonstrations, manifestations, posters, hate speech. It's enough. It's one thing if you want to protest about a country's policies. It's another when you call for the death and destruction of a people. It's yet more when you start committing aggression, trespass, destruction of property, intimidation. And it's yet more when all these demonstrations morph into what they really were. So what started as anti-Israel and anti-Semitic became anti-Canadian, anti-American, and then became demands for people to follow their way of life. A rejection of a liberal pluralistic society. Your presence at the rally on Tuesday is going to be able to give you some dignity and self-respect back and say, you know what, I'm taking my city back. It's my city, it's our city, and people have to respect the pluralism that is at the heart of a diverse, multicultural, democratic society. And it's my great pleasure to have with us, starting off the show, Ambassador Paul Hirshon, who is the Israeli Consul General in Montreal, responsible for Quebec and the Atlantic provinces. And I had the pleasure to hear him speak at two ceremonies last week commemorating Yom HaShoah, which is Holocaust Remembrance Day, including one at City Hall. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Lovely to be back.
You said some things that needed to be said. You said it so eloquently and so passionately. And as you said, at both places, that the Jewish people have been here before. We're not going there again. And that these fanatics have picked on the wrong generation of Jews to kick around. But you also said at City Hall with the mayor sitting there, that in all the cities you've lived, in all the countries you've been, you really never faced individual anti-Semitism. And indeed, you did say you didn't face it here until October 7th. What has been your experiences since then?
Beryl, you know, I as you just mentioned, I've lived in 7 countries. I've lived in more cities than that. And I've never encountered anti-Semitism. And to be fair, I didn't encounter it in Montreal prior to the 7th of October. But the wave of hatred that has flowed out over this city since October 7th it's not only been terrible, it's been unacceptable. Now I know that this is happening in other places, But this is Montreal, so we'll talk about Montreal, and other places can talk about them.
Right.
We in the West, we who place at the very center of our discourse the rights and the freedom of the individual, find ourselves up against a school of thought which has elevated suicide to a place in society which amounts to nothing less than the worship of death. It's enough already. It's enough already. They're entitled to have their opinions. They're entitled, look, I'm the Israeli Consul General. Obviously, I'm biased. They're entitled to criticize Israel. They're entitled to say what they want. They're not entitled to tell other people, myself included, that we're not allowed to disagree with them.
And it's even more than that. And as I said in my remarks before we went on air, they're demanding things from us as a city, as a society, to adapt to their particularity. It has nothing to do with any legitimate discussion or discourse. It's just madness in the streets. Are you surprised that we're not getting more full-throated condemnation from public officials? I say full-throated, not shocking, in quotations.
Well, I would say this. First of all, on campus, I think in particular, but not only, McGill and Concordia, the administrations have failed. It's a disgrace what's been going on various levels. Right now, there's the encampment on McGill. Earlier on, we've had other things on other campuses. And I think that the administrations have been weak, and I don't understand why. There are 40, 50,000 students at each, and there's a few hundreds at most who making life miserable for everywhere else. Off of campus, I understand. I'm in favor of demonstrations. I understand the importance of demonstrations. I'm not sure that it's acceptable to have people calling for genocide. I'm not sure it's acceptable for people saying at first only in Arabic, and then when it gets out of control, they switch to both English and French, saying, kill the Jews, do this, do that.
And we saw this.
I would expect a stronger condemnation.
And we saw this before, and you're being very polite and diplomatic. I can say it's not acceptable when our reporters and I went into mosques in November, and we taped imams. They were always the English portion, which was moderated, and the Arabic portion, which went into a whole thing from the river to the sea all the way to the infidels, which are Christians and Jews. It's a call to overturn Western liberal pluralistic civilization, and if they want and some kind of return to a 14th century caliphate. That kind of language in addition to the anti-Semitic remarks, in addition to the calls for genocide, is against our criminal code, Section 316, Section 317, Section 176. So we have the laws, and we can use them, but unfortunately...
Beryl, I want to say something, and that is this, is that we should be cognizant of the fact that it's not all of the Muslims, and a lot of it is ignorance. And what I mean by that is the following. Israel has made peace with 7 Arab countries, which is 51% of the Arab population in the world.
That is true, and that is historic.
You mentioned the rally on Tuesday, Israel Independence Day rally on Tuesday downtown, which I hope everybody will come to. You will see there Iranians demonstrating in favor of Israel. There are a lot of people in the Middle East, in the Arab world, Iran, they're not Arab, they're Persian, but Muslim, who are horrified by what they see going on in Iran, what they see going on under the fascist jackboot of Hamas, what Hamas has done, both to us in Israel and to their own people, even more so to their own people. But yes, you're right. There's a group of a coalition here of people who they're unaware of the bridges that have been built in the Middle East, and they are never going to forgive the Palestinians when one day the Palestinians reconcile with Israel.
I think that's an important note to end on, and it should be a positive note, because we can't, sometimes we shouldn't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in the sense of just looking at our local areas. It is a historic time, as you mentioned. For the first time in history, the majority of Arab Muslim countries are at peace with Israel diplomatic and economic ties with Israel, social ties with Israel. And that is important, and that is what's going to propel peace going forward.
And more on the way.
Ambassador Paul Hirschman, always a great pleasure. And Montreal, Tuesday, 11 o'clock, Place de Canada. We'll see you there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It remains a wonderful city.
It does. Thanks very much. We have a constant issue going on in Montreal, throughout the city. The homeless problem, I don't know if City Hall thinks it could talk it away, ignore it away, play with numbers, but it's bad, and it's getting worse, and it's not going to get better with rising housing costs. But what's happening in Côte-des-Neiges and DG really blew up in the past week. Our good friend Joel Chiash, who's with us. Joel, Councillor Stephanie Valenzuela is not happy.
No, she's not.
Rightly so.
Well, yeah, correct.
And she was joined by Elizabeth Prass and her colleague Sonny Moroz on this issue.
Right. Well, what started this all was that the opposition councillors for the local borough council, that's Stephanie Valenzuela for Darlington, along with Sonny Moroz from Snowdon, held a press conference at Martin Luther King Park. Also attending was Elizabeth Prass, who's the Darcy McGee MNA.
Right.
And Quebec official opposition spokesperson on the issue of homelessness. Anyway, they're demanding action by the local borough administration on this issue. Now, the reason why they did this at Martin Luther King Park, as you know, it's right in front of the Multicaf day center, which served as a temporary pilot project night shelter this past winter, with some disastrous consequences, as well as Martin Luther King Park is the site of a year-round homeless population, surrounded by residential and commercial properties. And the problem is getting worse. Now,
and this is the second problem in a couple of weeks. Well, that's been brought to light. There was the Hotel Dieu disaster a couple of weeks ago.
There's a Hotel Dieu disaster about making that into a proper facility for the homeless population, which was a real disaster. But in Côte-des-Neiges, Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, you have to remember this is the most populous borough on the island of Montreal. People forget about
167,000.
100, almost 170,000 people, and the problem is growing. There's no hard numbers on it, but just anecdotally, anybody who spent any time around the borough on the ground, there are dozens and dozens of homeless people in that area around the park, around the Carrie and Côte St. Catherine, Queen Mary, and it's not getting any better. Now, the people who have lived in the area have lived with this situation for quite some time. They spend their evenings looking out the windows. Sometimes.
Joe, by the way, what was the reason given for the closure of the Multicaf facility?
Well, the Multicaf facility had a 4-month trial period. Now, it was supposed to close on March 31st. It did. But 2 weeks into the project, the problems emerged. Now, this program was run by Prevention, CDN, and DG.
And these problems were so insolvable that nobody could come up with an idea of
listen, some of the criticism, it was very slapdash, and they didn't stick with the plan. The plan was to welcome 25 people per night to get warm, to get some rest, get some hot beverages into them to wait out the cold. What ended up happening some nights was up to 60 people. You had violence. You had drug and alcohol consumption indoors and out. There's people damaging property in the area. And the management of Multicaf told me that within weeks they regretted their decision to loan their space, and that a lot of the people who were causing the problem were people with actual homes who were coming around to party. Now, the cameras were turned off. Police are in the area all the time. Residents are fed up. And so the counselor for the area, Stephanie Valenzuela, who grew up in the neighborhood, who knows the issue in the area very well, said it's enough. Now, she made the point that we all recall about 6 months ago, Social Services Minister Lionel Carman basically said very publicly, very clearly, I'll fund any project you hand to me. And he told Elizabeth Prass, according to Prass, that he's waiting on a plan. So they're pushing for a turnkey plan from the borough, along with its various partners, the CEUS and the community organizations, put together a plan, find a facility for a 24/7, 365-day facility in the most populous borough of Côte-des-Neiges, find a property, put together a plan, and hand it to the province, and let's get started.
And Joel, I know we're going to get back to this. We're up against the clock a little bit, but I know you tried. Carman's still trying to keep promises on the DPG, on the youth protection file. So
Correct.
I won't hold my breath about that. But
Right.
he's a good guy personally. But I don't know. These ministries are a bit too much for him. But let me just wrap it up on this note. I know that you tried for days to get a reaction from the mayor of Côte-de-Neige.
Well, the mayor and her staff were asked for a comment about this. I received no response. They did not respond to the Suburban, but there was a testy debate about this at council this week, and that in the end, the motion, the proposal put forward by the opposition, the city agreed to take it. The borough agreed to take it, but they watered down the language somewhat. They made it more positive about working in collaboration with their partners. But it also it became a very hot debate, as the mayor claimed that the opposition didn't know how the city worked and questioned their knowledge of the issues. And I want to save that for next week, because we're going to talk about incivility at council.
Perfect.
But this is not going anywhere. The opposition, as you know, has been saying for years that the city is too often acting in a reactive way rather than proactive. Au fur et à mesure, everything's ad hoc, and it's hard to disagree when you see what's going on.
Joel Chasher, thanks for your great work, and we'll keep our eye on these issues and others. Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. Take care.
And off to the West Island, and we have again, Mayor Alex Batascia, DDO, is not happy with the Center City. He had an issue a couple of weeks ago at the Aglo, and now he's furious about the CMM. Chelsea St. Pierre, tell us what's happening.
So following what Joel just said, about the city being reactive rather than proactive. So normally that's the case, when we cover stories such as, homelessness in Montreal, they tend to react rather than be proactive in those situations. However, when it comes to urban planning, they're very, very proactive, and they tend to make decisions way ahead of time, not only for their own municipalities, but for the demerged cities, which are demerged cities. They are not municipalities.
That was about to say. So they seem to be proactive in terms of coming to conclusions, despite what any of the demerged cities did in their consultations, and that's what got Mayor Batascia upset.
Yeah, and not all demerged cities do consultations so well. The DDO, the Lac des Ormeaux, DDO is an example for the West Island of how to do proactive planning. I've even met a city councillor, I won't mention from which city, given the current situation, but there was even city councillors from other cities that have come to DDO at the public consultations that I've met with, that said that they were there to see what DDO is doing as an example for their own cities, because DDO takes a very strong stance in meeting with the public, reviewing with the urban planning department, going back and forth over and over again. I mean, we're talking several meetings, and then even after they've come up with the urban plan, they do again another 2 days of consultation at their city center to meet with residents so that anybody can come, and they do one weekday, a busy weekday, mind you, with lots of sports activities going on near the Civic Center, which is also attached to their main sports center, their library, and also on a weekend day where I personally watch hundreds of residents walk in and sit down and have a private meeting at one of the 3 booths set up with urban planning department employees, representatives, and so their plan is rock solid, and it's not just based on what the residents want, because sometimes
they have their own expertise there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I know you're going to be covering this as it develops, and I know Mayor Batascia is not going to let this go. So we know there's going to be more to come on this story of the friction that's always there between not only demerged cities, but as you said, between boroughs and the center city. Chelsea St. Pierre, thanks for your great work. And this is Beryl Wiseman, editor of the Suburban Radio Hour, and we'll be back with my friend and colleague Anthony Bonaparte But first, we're off to the CJD Traffic Center.
This news segment of the Suburban Radio Hour is brought to you by Click Air. Their team of certified technicians and electricians got you covered for all your heating and cooling needs. Click-air.ca, where comfort meets quality.